Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Non-essential travel is prohibited in British Columbia, and it will remain that way for the next 2 weeks at least.
As COVID-19 cases hit another record, the Premier says stay home. Also,
we live, we breathe, we love tourism. We miss it and we need it.
BC's tourism industry braces for another big blow as travelers from other provinces are told to stay away. And
this isn't a silver bullet. This is one tool in a series of tools.
with overdose deaths surging, Vancouver pushes to decriminalize simple possession of illicit drugs.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. BC hit yet another record today for daily COVID-19 infections.
And sadly, more people have died, and for the first time, our province is posting 2 straight days of double-digit deaths. Our Dan Burrett joins us live now with more on today's numbers. Dan.
More grim records broken, Tanya and Mike. We now have 762 new cases of COVID-19 in BC, our single highest daily total yet. The bulk of those cases, again, are in Fraser Health. 10 more people have died, meaning we've now lost 320 people so far. 209 people are in hospital, also a record. 58 of them are in ICU. That is down slightly from yesterday. We're now closing in on 6,900 active cases, and Public Health is actively monitoring close to 9,900 people across BC who are self-isolating right now. More grim numbers.
Yeah, and indeed. And so, Dan, Premier John Horgan is urging people not to travel within BC unless it's absolutely necessary. So what more could we see tomorrow?
Well, we are going to get a briefing from Dr. Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix. We understand we're expecting something on travel tomorrow, something more, and it's still not clear if they will be orders or just guidelines. Premier Horgan talked about that today. He does say our provincial health officer will have some more on other industries.
Dr. Henry will have more to say about gyms and other businesses tomorrow as she finalizes the orders that she'll be bringing forward then. But I'm confident that British Columbians get this, and we need to bear down for the next couple of weeks.
As I said, Dr. Henry and Health Minister Adrian Dix are holding a COVID-19 update tomorrow. Before that, Dr. Henry will host a technical briefing, so we're likely to get a lot more information from there. Tanya, Mike?
All right, Dan, thanks very much for that. Well, the COVID-19 gargle test is now available to anyone in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island. The saline gargle test had previously just been for school children ever since it was introduced back in September. It is less invasive than the swab test currently used to test for most coronavirus cases. Dr. Bonnie Henry previously described the saline gargle as an easier way to collect samples.
Well, the Retail Council of Canada is joining the call for the province to mandate masks in indoor public spaces. The group says a provincial order would help retail workers and store owners who have to deal with what they call aggressive behavior from customers who refuse to wear face coverings. Retailers have followed the province's advice, adding signage asking consumers to wear masks, and many stores also offer free masks to anyone who doesn't have one. But the Retail Council says it needs to be an enforceable measure in order to better protect workers and customers.
2 people have died. More than 100 others have become infected with COVID-19 following an outbreak at an Abbotsford care home.
It's one of the biggest hotspots of transmission in the Fraser Health region to date. As our John Hernandez reports, staff there say rapid testing could help curb similar outbreaks in the future.
For months, Dan Levitt has been hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
We have a large number of people who have COVID-19, unfortunately.
He's the director of this long-term care home in Abbotsford, where more than 100 people have tested positive for the coronavirus since the start of November.
We think it was a staff member that came in with asymptomatic. They made it through our screening procedures, and unfortunately, it got spread fairly quickly that way.
Fraser Health confirms at least 63 residents here have contracted the virus, along with 40 workers. 2 people have died. The facility has since locked down, cohorted its staff, and ramped up infection control. With no visitors allowed inside, today families gathered by windows.
It's been devastating for people living here and working here. Morale is a challenge, but we're doing everything we can to lift people's spirits up. We had a day of prayer yesterday in our community. Thousands of people were praying for us.
While Fraser Health says enhanced measures are in place, Levitt says what the facility really needs is rapid COVID-19 testing for everyone coming in and out, so the virus doesn't sneak in again.
We're doing it in professional athletes, we're doing it at airports, we're doing it in other settings. Surely we can do it in nursing. So I think it's the first thing we could do right away.
An aging building that's also due for an upgrade. Like many facilities, its current single-floor design might actually aid the spread of the virus.
And just by going down the hallway and the way that the long corridors are organized, you're going to have a lot of contact with people.
Staff have already raised millions of dollars for a rebuild, and they're also hoping to secure additional funding from the province so outbreaks like this won't happen again. John Hernandez, CBC News, Abbotsford.
As we mentioned, the province is telling people to stay home and those outside BC to stay away. Premier John Horgan is urging against all non-essential travel within the province.
And he's also pressuring the federal government to bring in a national approach to travel restrictions countrywide. Zara Premji reports.
The airport is a pretty quiet place these days, and it would be even slower if it were up to the BC Premier. There's already an advisory against non-essential travel within BC, and he would like the federal government to push for what he's calling a pan-Canadian approach.
The people of Quebec and Ontario and Manitoba need to know that they should stay in Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba until we get to a place where we can start distributing a vaccine across the country.
The Premier is asking for more messaging than actions. He says having something like a BC-only bubble would be unrealistic because the border is so large.
The evidence has shown that travel does contribute up to a portion of the cases that we have seen on the island.
When the chief health officer for Vancouver Island suggested a 14-day quarantine for people visiting or returning, the idea received a lukewarm reception. But still, provincial officials are urging people to stay put. Since the beginning of November, COVID-19 cases were identified on more than 40 domestic flights that flew in and out of YVR.
If everybody's being responsible and doing things the right way, then they should be allowed to move freely. But that being said, not everybody is like that. So, sometimes we have to save ourselves from ourselves.
BC's own travel advisory will be in place for at least 2 more weeks. Which isn't great news for Big White Ski Resort, which opens tomorrow.
The phones were ringing off the wall. We've had 37 cancellations so far today, and it's cost us close to $80,000. And it's really just people are confused.
BC is scheduled to give an update tomorrow, and it's possible that the restrictions here could be extended. As for the federal government, officials didn't have much to say on that proposed Canada travel plan, just that they're working with all of the premiers to manage the health crisis. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
And if you want to keep up with the latest COVID-19 news, you can join CBC Vancouver's Facebook group. Coronavirus in BC is what it's called. The group is now accepting new members. You can follow the page to keep up to date with the latest on coronavirus developments around our province. The goal is to offer a space for accountability and fact-checking through CBC journalists and a welcoming environment where we can have productive conversation around COVID-19 and its impacts around the world. Again, the group can be found by searching CBC Vancouver Coronavirus in BC on Facebook.
Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart is pushing to decriminalize illicit drug possession in the city. The plan is contained in a motion set to go before City Council next week. If approved, the city would then request a federal exemption from the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act for medical purposes.
What's so important about decriminalization is it starts to stop the stigma, reduce the stigma around drug use, and that means people are more likely to access essential health services.
The city calls it a health-focused approach to substance use. Stewart says Vancouver would be the first Canadian jurisdiction to decriminalize simple possession.
It's pretty much just like a legal thing, really, for me, because I've been to jail countless times for just small amounts of drugs.
I think the decriminalization would be good because it would be more out in the open, and I think it would be more likely that he might not be overdosing as much. Maybe he'd get the same, like something more consistent, you know?
Again, this would require federal approval, but Stewart says details of the administration of the plan, such as what amount of each substance is considered simple possession, could be worked out with Vancouver Coastal Health and Vancouver Police.
Well, the mother of a man missing for more than 4 years is now asking anyone who might know something to come forward.
Dana's been missing and presumed to have met with foul play and to be dead. But how do we know, and will we ever? I have no body, no conviction, and none of his belongings.
27-year-old Dane Stanway from Gibsons was reported missing May 12, 2016. Police say his disappearance is suspicious, and despite an investigation by homicide detectives, there is still no trace of him. Stanway's mother says the mystery is an ongoing nightmare for her. She's sure there is someone who has seen or heard something, and she's hoping they do the right thing. Anyone with information is asked to contact police.
Richmond RCMP are releasing more information on several raids of clandestine drug labs that took place late last month throughout the city. After an 8-month investigation, officers raided 3 homes suspected of producing synthetic drugs and 3 commercial properties as well.
The Richmond RCMP targeted this criminal group and the dismantling of these illicit drug laboratories. As a result, there'll be a significant disruption of organized crime within our city and beyond.
Among the seized items, 300,000 doses of suspected methamphetamine, almost 7,000 doses of suspected fentanyl, 6 firearms, more than $100,000 cash, plus 2 vehicles. 6 people have been arrested. Charges are pending.
All right, our meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. A very soggy Johanna. I guess we're all used to having multiple umbrellas on hand these days.
It's so true. Yeah, I really just wanted you guys to think I was hardcore for choosing to come out in the heavy rain. Hopefully it paid off because, yeah, it's very wet. And I saw the radar before I came out here. This is actually the heaviest of the bands tracking across the strait, really settling in on East Vancouver and the North Shore right now. This is definitely considered heavy rain, and it is going to ease in the next couple of hours. Let me show you what it looks like on the radar. We've got a system, again, crossing the strait. Seeing the yellows and the oranges in the radar, those are the heavier downpours. This came from Victoria, so easing back over on the island. This is our story for the next few days. Okay, not this constantly, but rounds of rain and showers as a low pressure system sitting off the coast of Haida Gwaii pinwheels in rounds of showers and rain. We will see things ease in the next couple of hours for Metro Vancouver, a generally quieter evening. In case you were wondering if you would be serenaded by the sound of pounding rain on your windows all night long. We do get a bit of a break. Rain back though pre-dawn hours, and I'll take you through the full forecast tomorrow. It is going to be a soggy next few days and into early next week. We are well on our way to meeting November rainfall averages for Vancouver. I think after tonight and tomorrow's rainfall, we could meet our entire November rainfall average, which is about 200 millimeters. And I think we're about 140 millimeters right now. So I'll keep you posted, and I will see you inside. I think I've done my job here.
I must say, it was nice to hear the pitter-patter of the rain all throughout your forecast. It really added to that scene. Thanks so much, Johanna. And a reminder, you can always watch this newscast live on CBC Gem.
CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Well, still ahead, final results of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine trial were released today. Coming up, why the new results show it's even more effective than first thought.
And a little later in the newscast, the early edition columnist Yute Lee is going to take a look at the history of working from home. He'll also show us how the office space has changed over the years and what to expect when the pandemic is finally over.
And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, realtors and residents alike keep noticing the same trend. People are leaving the city mid-pandemic for lower costs and more space.
So the question is, will this exodus last in the years ahead? Lauren Pelly has details on how communities are changing because of COVID-19.
This is John Keogh's new lifestyle on Salt Spring Island. Cycling trails, coastal sunsets, picturesque harbor towns, and a backyard view you won't find in Toronto.
Yeah, sometimes I sit out here and work, so there's like a little sitting area. Out here is basically, that's kind of the views.
The marketing professional made the move after his company started working remotely.
And as time dragged on, I think for me, what happened was I started wondering and sort of questioning the value of staying in Toronto.
Don't you just love wood paneling?
Oh, I mean, the more the better.
You do love wood paneling.
This Parkdale couple is also mulling a move after road tripping around Ontario mid-pandemic.
And so we just realized that these places are all really different, and you couldn't really just kind of tell from like a weekend getaway, like if it was somewhere you'd want to live.
We'd be driving around and I'd be making note of people as we pass by. I'd be like, oh, that's a person of color. There's another one right there. And, growing up in Toronto, like living here your whole life, you don't realize you're doing that until you leave Toronto and like diversity drops.
The pair launched a website called 90 Minutes from Toronto, analyzing the demographics, prices, and culture in towns outside the GTA. Interest and traffic spiked fast.
There's the option of having like entire friend groups or like entire, like loose family units, just kind of uprooting and moving entirely over to these new areas, which is, it's nice to be able to create your own community.
Over the summer, home sales in regions far from Toronto outpaced sales from the year before, far more than the GTA, with Simcoe and Dufferin County sales increasing by more than 50%. The realtor behind that analysis isn't sure the trend will stick, but if it does.
Well, this potentially opens up new sources of housing supply.
Even, he says, in areas as far out as Barrie.
Builders weren't necessarily building in the far outer suburbs because there just wasn't quite as much demand.
And those possibilities could even be thousands of kilometers away.
I really do wonder if what the future of cities looks like if this, remote work trend continues.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Yeah, I don't know if we're quite seeing an exodus in these parts, but I mean, you hear people talking about it, right?
Well, and it's interesting, some cities have much more of a corporate downtown, right? Like you look at Calgary and Houston and those types of cities, but Vancouver is very livable for a city core, so I think maybe we're seeing it a bit less here. Hopefully still lots of life in the downtown core for years to come.
Well, maybe working from home is the other alternative, whenever that may come.
Yes.
We shall see.
We shall see.
Okay, lots of COVID news coming up in just a sec. Stay with us. CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day is going to look a bit different this year, but it's still in support of an important cause, local food banks across BC. Join us online and on Radio 1, December 4th.
Welcome back. More encouraging developments on the COVID-19 vaccine front tonight. Final results of the Pfizer drug trial were released today, and as Christine Burak reports, they show the vaccine to be even more effective than originally thought.
Their phase 3 trial is over. Pfizer and BioNTech now say their shot is 95% effective.
I'm pretty confident that within the next few months, at the latest, some people in Canada will start getting these vaccines.
In a press release, the drug maker says out of 43,000 volunteers, 170 contracted COVID-19. Most of them got a placebo. Just 8 had received the vaccine. And it was almost equally effective in people over 65, which is harder to achieve. Pfizer says it'll be applying for emergency use authorization in the U.S. within days. American healthcare workers could start receiving the shot in late December. As for Canada,
The manufacturers, Pfizer and Moderna, have actually submitted to Health Canada for the rolling regulatory approval, which is great. It means they can supply data as they get it, and we can review it very rapidly.
So I think we need to be patient.
Researchers say no leading vaccine maker has publicly released its safety data yet.
If there is side effect that we start seeing, it needs to be well managed and not have people see their hope shattered.
We're actually positioned better than just about any other country in the world in terms of access to a robust portfolio of vaccines.
That portfolio currently contains 7 vaccines, including one made in Canada, which is now entering phase 2 trials. Unlike Pfizer and Moderna's gene-based vaccines, Medicago's vaccine mimics the coronavirus. It shows the immune system what to look for on the outside, but inside it's empty and can't cause the infection. The government has also pre-ordered a leading vaccine out of the UK. Detailed phase 2 trial data for Oxford's COVID-19 vaccine is set to be released tomorrow. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
Nunavut recorded 10 new cases of COVID-19 today. The territory saw its very first case less than 2 weeks ago, but that rapidly jumped to 70 cases, prompting fears its fragile healthcare system will be overwhelmed. And in an attempt to avert disaster, a territory-wide lockdown began today. Jackie McKay is there.
This is it, folks. It's time to take a stand and fight against COVID-19.
Officials in Nunavut say the situation is critical. Resources are stretched and the territory's healthcare system is reaching its limit.
If there's more cases, our ability to manage it is going to depend a lot on the size of the outbreak, the size of the community, and how much work is needed to get it under control.
The virus has now spread to 4 communities, and contact tracers are racing to catch up. Today, a 2-week lockdown began to try to avoid overwhelming Nunavut's small, isolated healthcare centers, ill-equipped to handle severe cases of COVID-19.
You need higher level care, like being intubated, being on a ventilator, being in ICU. Of course, you need to go south, and sometimes arranging for that to happen and that happening quickly can sometimes be a barrier, to getting the proper treatment on time.
So far, Nunavut has not asked for help from the federal government, but the health minister says they're in constant communication and federal help is available.
We don't want to have to go there, but if there was a need, in fact, for the military to come and give us support, that they would be able to go to that extent.
One person has been hospitalized in Winnipeg. They've since been discharged. The epicenter of the outbreak remains the hamlet of Arviat, but the spread to even smaller communities is concerning, places like Whale Cove. The mayor there is trying to keep people calm.
I'm trying to recommend that the community should not panic and not visit, or if they don't have any priorities, to stay home, and as of today, it's locked down.
Also trying to calm nerves, the healthcare workers in Iqaluit, Nunavut's only hospital with just 35 beds. The city posted this image on social media, showing 2 paramedics in PPE with their pictures taped to their chests.
Health officials say they won't know for several weeks if the lockdown has worked, but things are still likely to get worse before they get better. Jackie McKay, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Elsewhere around the world, people in South Australia have been rushing to stock up on supplies. The state is taking new measures to control COVID-19 there. A 6-day lockdown took effect at midnight. Officials say the state needs a so-called circuit breaker to avoid more new infections. Stephanie Skandaris has the details.
22 cases of COVID-19 is all it's taken to grind South Australia to a halt. All 1.7 million people in this state must stay in their homes except for essential activities. Most businesses and schools are closed. Outdoor exercise is banned. Supermarkets will stay open, but takeout food from restaurants, that's not allowed. These extreme restrictions will last 6 days. Then they'll slightly ease for another 8, which brings us up to that 14-day incubation period. Now, officials believe this outbreak started from hotel quarantine, when someone who returned from the UK passed the virus on to someone from the hotel cleaning staff, and then they in turn passed it on to their family. The health experts say this strain is highly contagious with a short incubation period. Premier Stephen Marshall says that's why they're going so hard so early. Here's more of what he had to say.
This is about South Australia pausing so that we stay ahead of the virus. Our concern is that if we don't have this circuit breaker, that we will not stay ahead of this. There is no second chance to stop a second wave.
These measures aim to avoid the kind of prolonged restrictions seen in the neighboring state of Victoria, which just came out of its own 112-day lockdown. But for Victoria's part, it's now recorded 19 days straight with 0 COVID cases, and more rules are expected to ease this weekend. Stephanie Skandaris for CBC News, Melbourne.
It has been banned from flying anywhere in the world for the past 20 months, but today, the Boeing 737 MAX airliner was cleared for flight again by American authorities. The plane was grounded after its computer system caused 2 deadly crashes. As Katie Nicholson reports tonight, families of the victims are calling today's decision a big mistake.
Paul Droge says he lost his entire world when the 737 MAX carrying his young family plunged into the ground just minutes after taking off from Addis Ababa.
I can tell you that I sunk into a chasm of desolation and a lot of pain.
More pain today after hearing the planes are cleared to fly again.
For them, it's all about making money. It's about business. For us, it's about the loss of humanity.
But the Federal Aviation Administration says Boeing fixed the software problem that made the plane's nose go down and promised there will be improved pilot training.
I can tell you now that I am 100% comfortable with my family flying on it.
That may be, but while the planes were mothballed around the world, a U.S. congressional report found not just serious problems with the aircraft's design, but also a culture of concealment at Boeing and a lack of oversight of the Seattle-based aviation giant by the FAA. The question now, can the public trust the American regulator?
I think there's reasonable confidence the FAA is getting it right now. It took a long time, and unfortunately, a lot of people died until they did get it right, and that's a sad thing.
Transport Canada usually falls in lockstep with the FAA. In a statement, it says it will soon finish its own independent review of the plane, and that there will be differences between what the FAA has approved today and what Canada will require for its operators, like additional procedures on the flight deck and pre-flight, as well as differences in training. That will mean extra training for pilots at WestJet and Air Canada. They are still waiting for Transport Canada's approval before they even start a plan to bring their 737 MAX jets back in service, something experts warn could take a while because they've been grounded for so long. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, still ahead, a deeper look at the impacts of BC travel screeching to a halt. How our tourism industry, already reeling, is preparing to survive a second wave of economic devastation. Stay with us.
It's 7 a.m. The Avalon Hotel restaurant in North Vancouver has just opened, and a gaggle of tourists tuck in to breakfast. 64-year-old Helga Jacobs and her 72-year-old husband Herman are from Camrose, Alberta. They came with 40 other townsfolk on a charter bus from their hometown. It's the last day of their 3-day tour. They still haven't seen all of Expo.
And we're going to go to the Ontario. We hear so many good reports about that, and we've sort of ducked it because of the lineups. But this morning we're going to get in that lineup.
The tourists have paid for their bed and their breakfast, but the hotel won't see them for lunch or dinner. They'll spend money for that at Expo. So, on a whim and a prayer, the Camrose townsfolk are on their way to Expo. Helga and Herman Jacobs will be just 2 of 112,000 people to visit the fair this day. Like most of them, they'll spend their money on site, their bus totally bypassing local businesses.
Our 3 days here have been see Expo and go back to your hotel and have a good sleep and be ready for the next morning.
And see Vancouver some other time.
Right.
Expo has anything the tourist wants. Free entertainment, more than 60 restaurants, and souvenir stands selling everything from plastic wallets to priceless works of art. Helga and Herman happily disappear through the gates. beyond the reach of local businesses. But Expo was supposed to spread the wealth around, not act as a black hole, vacuuming the spare change from tourist pockets. At least that's what business people were told.
Their expectations were far too high, and it's unfortunate because that was contagious, where everybody's expectations got high.
Doreen Floyd runs an antique shop in Gastown. She says business in the tourist strip is down 40 to 50% from this time last year. Gastown is being turned into a ghost town. The streets used to be flooded with 600 to 1,500 tourists a day from visiting cruise ships that dock nearby. Not anymore.
We are lucky maybe if we talk to 2 people a day off of the cruise ships. They're apparently put right on the buses, right from the cruise ships, taken to Expo and taken back again.
What this all boils down to is Expo is too successful. Tourists come here and stay here. Locals spend all their money here. The Downtown Vancouver Association represents big business in the city. It says the trend could reverse. As over the summer, more tourists come, locals won't want to come here. They'll spend their money back in the city. But come September, the tourists will leave, and locals will likely come back in large numbers. That means the business spin-offs from Expo could once again turn into tailspins.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We need a pan-Canadian approach to travel. We need to make sure that people in Coquitlam are living under the same rules as people in Chicoutimi.
We don't know if a majority of our businesses will see the spring.
Tourism operators in BC are dreading a provincial travel pause. Premier John Horgan is telling British Columbians to stay home and those from other provinces to stay away. He's also pressuring the federal government to bring in a national approach to travel restrictions Canada-wide. Horgan is urging against all non-essential travel within our province for the next 2 weeks, at least.
Well, Dr. Bonnie Henry is reporting another record high of 762 new cases of COVID-19 in BC today. And another double-digit day in deaths, 10 more deaths today. There are 209 people in the hospital right now, with 58 of them in intensive care. There are now more people in the hospital with COVID-19 and more active cases than at any other point during the pandemic.
But what's so important about decriminalization is it starts to stop the stigma, reduce the stigma around drug use.
Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart says he will ask the federal government to approve a plan to decriminalize simple possession of illicit drugs in the city. The move comes as the overdose crisis shows no sign of slowing. 2020 is tracking to be the worst year on record, with 328 overdose deaths in Vancouver so far.
Well, as you just heard, the province is telling people to stay home and those outside BC to stay away.
Premier Horgan urging against all non-essential travel within the province right now. And he's also pressuring the federal government to bring in a national approach to travel restrictions across the country.
But as our Zara Premji reports, there are fears BC's tourism industry may not survive a second wave of economic disaster.
This is not the time to go storm watching on the west coast of Vancouver Island.
Premier John Horgan made one thing clear today to all British Columbians: if you're not required to travel right now, then don't.
When it comes to travel, non-essential travel is prohibited in British Columbia, and it will remain that way for the next 2 weeks at least.
But businesses across the province say another sudden halt to the tourism industry comes with the magnitude of consequences. Victoria's hotel occupancy has already dropped below 10% since the start of the pandemic.
I think you may see in urban centers like Vancouver and Victoria, some large hotels closing for a period of months, and that's all those jobs are gone and they don't come back. They're not going somewhere else. And they may be the right decisions, but they're not without significant impact.
And specifically on Vancouver Island, some businesses are insisting if you're not from the island, don't come for now.
A lot of personal contact who have actually asked customers from the Lower Mainland not even to come into their stores.
Whistler's mayor is also acutely aware of a second economic hit on the horizon, but is still asking people to listen to the province.
This has been devastating for our town.
and we live, we breathe, we love tourism. From an economic and I think from just a human standpoint, we miss it and we need it, and that's why flattening this curve is so critical.
Over in Penticton, a similar story is brewing. Business owners that rely on crowds from across the province say they're battling against a no-win situation if recreational travel screeches to a stop.
A shutdown would be the worst thing for all of us. So if we can take a couple of weeks and just regroup and manage to stay open, manage to not have to have a complete shutdown, I think for all of us, that kind of takes that double-edged sword and maybe puts it a little farther away from ripping us apart.
The tourism industry is urging the province to be very clear in whatever further restrictions could come forward, leaving no room for confusion.
So that, various businesses know what the short and long term looks like. And then we can plan and work accordingly to that. We don't know if a majority of our businesses will see the spring, And so if it does come down to the fact that there's no travel within BC, then I'm not even sure where to begin.
And the Premier's messaging isn't just targeting travel within BC. He's pushing for what he calls a pan-Canadian travel approach. Horgan is calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to bring in a national travel strategy that's uniform across the country. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
Now, many people are, of course, working from home right now. Coming up, columnist Yute Lee ponders the real possibility that while many of us will still have jobs, we may not have an office to go back to when the pandemic is finally over.
And at 6:35, you're looking at a live shot of the W on the Woodwards building. It was a Wednesday washout again on the south coast. So will we see more of the wet stuff tomorrow? Johanna's full forecast is next.
The Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates. Rebate? Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
Welcome back. Is the office as we know it over? Well, turns out the pandemic is not the first time people consider this very question.
Yes, the Early Edition columnist Yute Lee explores the future of the traditional workplace.
There we go. Hey DJ, nice headphones. You're so funny. Hey guys, don't mind me, just making dinner. No worries. So thanks for being on this call, guys. We gotta think of an intro for this video. Anyone have any thoughts? Yute, you have to unmute yourself. No. Okay. Anyone else? Fun, snappy intro ideas?
Well, actually, I was just thinking last night that we could... No, you go. You go first. So like I was saying, I was wondering what sort of demographic we were hoping to achieve here. Not humble opinion.
Guys. During the pandemic, we've heard about the essentials. Groceries, walking, tigers. I want to talk about everything else. What we've deemed the non-essentials. With this pandemic, a lot of us are now working from home. And sure, it took some time for everyone to figure out how to unmute on Zoom and acknowledge that Slack exists, but the world didn't end. Well, at least not yet. In fact, many are thinking about making this change permanent. Facebook, Shopify, Zillow, and Twitter are making plans to let employees work from home forever. If you're lucky enough to have a job right now, you might be having a similar conversation. So, is the office obsolete? Well, I looked into it, and it's actually not the first time we've had this debate. Before COVID-19, before Slack, even before Skype, we had the OPEC oil crisis of 1973. What happened? More international politics than I care to get into, which led to gas being in really short supply in North America. That gas powered the cars that took the majority of North Americans to work and back. Without it, people couldn't get to their offices. At the same time, there were growing concerns that all these cars weren't so great for the environment anyways. That got people thinking. Instead of moving workers from their homes to the office, what if we move the office to their homes? Yes, employees could just work from their homes. No cars, gas, or pollution necessary. Just telephones to stay in touch. They called it telecommuting. On top of that, companies like IBM realized there were other benefits to remote work beyond helping the environment and sticking it to big oil. It was a way to hire talent from anywhere, not just the neighborhoods near their offices. It also, of course, meant saving office space, which meant saving money. By 2009, 40% of IBM's employees didn't work out of an office, which, according to the company, meant saving about $100 million every year. Meanwhile, our society changed. The 1970s saw a surge of women entering the workforce. The nuclear family became less and less relevant, and it became normal for both spouses to be employed. Remote work began to be seen as a way to provide flexibility for households balancing families along with their careers. And over the years, many found remote work to be helpful for their work as well. It turns out the office can actually be a bit distracting. There are pointless meetings, noisy coworkers, and office politics. Working from home allows you to choose when and how you work. And there are very compelling studies suggesting that this may help you focus better and get more done. And I can't overstate this, the growing popularity of remote work was ultimately possible because of huge transformative advances in technology that made our work devices more portable, more affordable, and more connected than ever before. When people first thought of remote work in the 1970s, we had telephones, typewriters, and file cabinets. Now, we have smartphones, laptops, and the frickin' internet. In the future, we'll probably all be in the Matrix anyways. The office is becoming less and less of a necessity. Despite all that, before the pandemic, the office was hardly on the way out. Companies were investing more into their office spaces than ever before, and others were actually reversing their work from home policies. Remember IBM? Well, in 2017, the company announced that it would be bringing 2,600 remote marketing employees back to the office. Yahoo, Reddit, Bank of America, and Best Buy have all made similar decisions too. So what happened? Well, the office got a reboot. Not that one, this one. This was Google's offices in 1999, and they were nothing special. Yeah, lots of cubicles and lots of beige, pretty typical of offices of that era. But in 2003, they hired architecture firm Clive Wilkinson to just freshen things up a bit. Cubicle dividers were replaced with glass walls, vibrant colors, and beautiful common areas. This was controversial. At the time, offices were often seen as soulless bureaucratic spaces that only inspired you to get in, get your work done, and get out. Google's new offices completely challenged that idea. This was an office you actually wanted to spend time in. There was free gourmet food, a gym, massages, and sleeping pods. But this wasn't just about creating a luxury office resort. Google was a tech innovator, and they wanted a space that would produce innovation. In the plans, the architects repeatedly mentioned that they were inspired by university campuses, places where you could make connections, learn, and join a community. A key part of this? Encouraging interactions. Google calls it casual collisions, but you might know of it as the water cooler effect. The theory goes, when we interact with each other, especially people that we might not normally talk to, we think of new ideas, we refine, we learn, we get unstuck, maybe even find friendship. Google's offices were very intentionally designed to encourage that as much as possible. As a Google employee today, you might meet in a tent, a caravan, or a gondola. And people loved it, especially creative, knowledge-based industries like tech, research, and consulting, which were rapidly taking over the modern economy. Companies increasingly saw frequent, collaborative interactions as essential to hatching new ideas, and the office was the incubator. Instead of cubicle farms, companies embraced open offices and breakout spaces, collaborative furniture, boardroom tables that can transform into ping pong tables, and beer in the fridge. Just look at IBM's office spaces today. It might not be the Googleplex, but yeah, it's not bad. And it wasn't just big tech companies. Co-working spaces like WeWork convinced even solo freelancers that they weren't paying hundreds of dollars a month just for beautiful shared office spaces, but a community where you could find personal fulfillment, all while enjoying some delicious fruit water. I don't get it. So, to recap, technological and societal changes over the past half-century have made working from home more feasible while promising autonomy and flexibility. But at the same time, the office evolved and stayed relevant by emphasizing collaboration, innovation, and community. But I think the question still remains. What kind of environment is better for, work? What are the spaces that make us more productive, more creative, and happier in our jobs? Well, it turns out that's a much more difficult question to answer. Trust me, we tried. There are countless studies about remote work and offices, but it's pretty much impossible to combine them into any one conclusion. If anything, they just demonstrate how our work is bewilderingly diverse and complex. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. So if you're wondering whether you should work from home or an office after this pandemic, the key is to approach that question with nuance. First, it really depends on the type of work you're doing. If your job frequently depends on working with others, the office may be the easiest, most reliable place for communicating with your team. But if your work is mostly self-driven with long to-do lists and the occasional meeting, the office might just be a distraction. Second, working from home or the office doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing conversation. You can do a bit of both, and in theory, get the benefits of both. If the pandemic has taught us anything, being forced into only one kind of workspace kind of sucks. Third, we're all different, and the way we want to relate to our work is different. Some people really like to connect with their colleagues face-to-face and appreciate how the office keeps work and life separate. Others prefer working independently and want their jobs to fit more seamlessly around their personal lives. Finally, we should remember that the physical spaces we work in are just a small aspect of our work. In fact, I find a lot of the values we associate with our workspaces have much more to do with our work culture. For example, Mark Zuckerberg says he wanted Facebook to have an open office because
we want to create this very open and transparent culture in our company where everyone can see what everyone else is working on.
But do glass walls really make a transparent company? In the same way, just adding collaborative furniture to your office doesn't guarantee collaboration. And working from home doesn't guarantee autonomy if you're being dragged into a Zoom call every 30 minutes.
All this is to say, the pandemic hasn't made the office obsolete. It's just reignited a decades-long debate on how and where we do our best work, whether it's in the boardroom or your bedroom. All right.
I was waiting for that ending. We knew it was coming. It's the new Zoom.
We did.
The Zoom framing, right? It's the corporate on top and the leisure on the bottom.
Yes, Ute with his flannels. And a fully clothed, we assume, Johanna Wagstaffe joins us. And you have been one of the many people in this office, this facility that has been working from home. I mean, it's just the reality we find ourselves in.
It's so true. I mean, I miss seeing both of you face to face, but there are definite advantages. I mean, literally 5 feet away from me is a toddler, husband, and dog, all in various states of being clothed. So I won't pan over, but
especially the dog.
Yeah, especially the dog. The work-life integration is nice. So I like that concept of, in our new normal, a bit of this, bit of that. But yeah, I do miss you guys. I'm just going to say it once. So before any chaos breaks down, let's take you to the current temperatures, where we have a pretty seasonal forecast as far as temperatures go, and seasonal as far as the precip goes as well. It's a rainy November. 7 in through YVR right now, 6 out towards Tofino. Temperatures will be sort of what we experience today for the next few days. A little bump up in temperatures for Friday. Check back on that radar. The heaviest of the rain now east of Abbotsford, heading into Chilliwack. It's easing across Metro Vancouver. You can see over on the Strait. Still looking at precip, but not the heavy stuff we were dealing with just earlier this hour. All thanks to this low pressure system sitting off the coast, pinwheeling in those showers for the foreseeable future. Taking you through the forecast models, you can see that rain snow line is down around 1,000 meters, so we will get some fresh snow for the local mountains. Rain moving back in pre-dawn. It's a pretty showery Thursday. We'll see some breaks in there though. And then as we head into Friday, same story, another system sliding down our coast should get the heavy stuff to us for the afternoon hours. And then rain again for the weekend. But I do think we'll see some sunny breaks as we head into Saturday. Fresh snow for much of the province. If you're in Kitimat, Terrace, or Stewart, another 5 centimeters tonight. You can see those darker blues down along our coastal mountains and the Rockies, a good 20 centimeters over the next 24 hours. Seeing some sunshine for other parts of the province. Get through some flurries and through Kamloops, Kelowna, and Cranbrook in the morning. You'll be rewarded by sunshine in the afternoon. Some cold wind chills up towards Prince George, waking up to sort of minus 25 wind chills in the Peace region. I really should focus more on the provincial forecast for the time being, since we're just going to be looking at the weather, not actually traveling to those places. 8 for tomorrow, with rain continuing right through to Saturday. There's the hint of sun for your Saturday forecast. I'll work on the timing of when we actually see that sun emerge. But yeah, prepare yourselves for a pretty soggy next 5-day forecast. Overnight lows are actually pretty mild. As we get into Sunday night, our seasonals for overnights are around 3 degrees. So this is a trend we've been seeing more and more in the last few decades, warmer overnights. So this is actually more our normal than those 3s. Just want to give you a sneak peek at the early next week forecast. We are looking at things to cool down starting Tuesday and Wednesday. A much cooler system will move in, and that might be clearing skies. So I leave you with that hint of some hope for the long range, but you've got to wait till Wednesday.
I liked how Wesley made a little appearance in there too. Thank you so much for adding to that forecast.
The joys of working from home.
There you go, proof. Up next, bringing new Indigenous superheroes to life. How Marvel is changing its strategy thanks to an Indigenous creator. That's on the way. Stay with us.
once it's completely on, Goose, and be careful, like you must be completely on stage.
This piece is called Approximately Close. It's, you know, a little bit of distance, maybe not. What does it mean? Of course, it's made during this time of a pandemic where there's regulations and rules and protocols put in place with 2 meters distance.
So let's see everyone coming on stage.
Approximately Close, I think, is about memories. It's about those things that we, like memories, you could almost touch them. You know, they're there in the back of our minds, inside our hearts, and so we get close to them at times and then they disappear. In order to continue working in a good way, in a satisfying way for the dancers, by being able to touch and be close and to really dive into this necessary work that we do. We decided to quarantine for a bit and get tested and then go in an artistic bubble.
It was sort of birthed out of having to use all of these limitations that were placed on us and sort of adapt from that so we can still be doing what we love and being useful in the world, because some of us, this is our means of expression.
Getting a little chillier now, but the sun is out and people are embracing it. Golfers enjoyed a warm fall. Courses were busy and some stayed open later too. Golf PEI says it was the best October the province has ever seen.
Still a nice enough day to golf, and we're walking 18 holes, and it's just a great walk.
Belvedere Golf Club is closed now, but management says 2020 was a good year.
The demand on each day to get out and play didn't stop all season long, and we were virtually 100% capacity all day, every day, all year.
Weather helps, but the drive to be outside is also due to fears of COVID-19. Some sporting-based businesses say people are home more and looking for ways to get active. A local kayak business says kayaking exploded during the pandemic.
The interest of kayaking with local people was incredible. A lot of people were working on some people call it a bucket list, I like to call it a life list, but people were ticking off things they'd never done before.
It didn't make up for the lost tourists, but overall it was a good season. And because of the weather and customers, also the longest season in 21 years. The tennis courts, the good weather has kept people playing.
The tennis court have been very, very busy here in Charlottetown and asking coaching time, and yeah.
He said
Marvel released a comic today spotlighting Indigenous superheroes.
Now, the heroes themselves aren't new, but the Indigenous talent tapped to tell their stories is.
Rafi Bouchikania now on how one Edmonton artist got involved and his push for further inclusion in the mainstream comic book world.
I look at a character with, trauma in her past.
Cree artist Kyle Charles is a big fan of Danny Moonstar, a Cheyenne Native American superhero in Marvel Comics. The Edmonton-based creator from Whitefish Lake First Nation has been drawing comics for years.
My phone pinged, and I looked at it, and it said, want to draw a Marvel story, an email, and I thought someone was pranking me.
It was no prank. One of the biggest publishers took notice, wanting to showcase Indigenous superheroes, their adventures presented by Indigenous storytellers.
If we want it done properly, we have to do it ourselves. I don't want to sit on the sidelines while somebody else, scores touchdowns using our stories and our culture.
How Indigenous characters have been represented has been a problem for decades. Marvel introduced Thunderbird, their first Indigenous member of superhero team the X-Men, in the 70s, killed him 4 months later. In movie adaptations, with bigger audiences, not much better. Thunderbird's brother, Warpath, said only a couple of words in this X-Men film from 2014 before an evil robot killed him.
We need to have more Indigenous graphic novelists in mainstream institutions.
This Anishinaabe media scholar says historically, surviving characters have been portrayed by non-Indigenous artists.
But they've often been one-dimensional, very stereotypical.
But now, Marvel and others are stepping up their game.
And when you add an Indigenous voice into that mix, naturally that character has to become multidimensional.
Like Kyle Charles drawing his childhood favorite. Fans can't wait.
I'm here for the artist. He's very talented.
Something a bigger crowd will soon see as Charles brings characters to life in the mainstream. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, and I mean, no matter where it ends up and whatever format, it all starts with the cartoon illustrator, the artist, right at the beginning there.
And look at the talent, just watching him, sketch in real time there. Wow, it's incredible.
Yes. All right, just a reminder, you can always watch this newscast online, cbc.ca/BC.
Our next local news is right here at 11 o'clock tonight after the National with Dan Burrett. Good night.
Good night.